The next thing that we're going to do with P5js is play with a little bit of generative art. So generative art is a little bit different than what we've been looking at so far. What we've been looking at so far with what we've made has been work that's very more or less planned out, where the end result is always exactly the same. With generative art, the end result isn't always exactly the same. There is some variability in what you create, and there will be variation, maybe a lot, maybe a little, depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it, as far as what the end result will look like. So we're going to create something that looks like this, and this is based off of the work of Victor Vasarely, who was not, well, you might be able to argue he was a generative artist, but he worked before we had computers. His time period is a little bit further back. So his work looks more like this, and the piece that we are making, or the sort of piece that we are making, is more based on something like this, or one of these sorts of pieces, right? So you can see maybe some of the basis or the inspiration for what we're making today. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go to the P5js editor, or an editor for P5js. I suppose it doesn't have to be this one, but this is probably the easiest one to use. I'm just going to create a new one, and we're just going to start with what we have here. So the very first thing that I need to figure out how to do is how to create one of these little, like a unit, right? Like this is a giant canvas filled of squares and rectangles, squares and circles. And the way that I am thinking of this is sort of each one of these is a little unit, right? And it repeats a bunch across horizontally and a bunch vertically going down, right? So we've got sort of this giant table of these, right? So the first thing we need to do is figure out how to make one of them, right? So we need to make a rectangle, right? And we'll start it at just the top left, and maybe let's make it 100 by 100 for right now, just for ease. Right, and so if we draw that, all right, we've got a rectangle. We need a circle. So circles are based in the center, right? So we define the center point instead of the top left. So this would be like 50, 50, and I don't know, maybe I want to do like 85 by 85. Okay, so that works. We've got sort of that unit down, right? That basic single unit that's going to be repeated a bunch of times. Now we need to add some color in there, right? And so the color aspect is interesting because there's a lot of variability, right? A lot of randomness to this. So I want to do something similar. So instead of deciding a specific color, I'm going to have the computer decide the colors for me. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually have variables, and I will let it randomly decide what numbers will go in those variables. So when we choose a color, we do fill, right? And then we choose 3 values, right? We choose an R value, a green value, and a blue value, right? So I need to create each one of those, right? And right now this will basically be black, right? Because they're all sitting at 1. Now what I want to do is I want to let the computer choose what those are. So in here I'm going to say that R is going to be equal to random, and then I'm going to choose the whole range, right? So we know that each one of these values could be 0 to 255, so I'm going to start at 0 and go up to 255. And then I'm just going to copy paste this in there for green and for blue. And now it will randomly decide the colors, except it's going very, very fast. So let's tone that down a notch. Let's say that our frame rate is maybe 3. There we go. Now the inside and the outside are always the same color, and we don't want that. So that means that we need to choose a new fill in between creating the rectangle and creating the circle. So I'm just going to copy and paste that again. And now we have different ones. So we have the basic units, right? We have the basic unit here that we want to repeat across and down. Now these don't have a stroke on them, so I think I'm going to also say no stroke. But overall, we can see that we have that idea, right? Now we just need to get it to go across and down. So that means that the position of the rectangle and the circle need to change, because right now, like, it's drawing a bunch of these, right? It's drawing, like, what did I say, frame rate 3? So it's drawing 3 of these per second. So if I want to go across and down, that means that I need to change the position of both of these, right? But if I change it, so this is by 100, so if I say that I want a new one to be 100 over, the problem is now it's, well, I meant to put it here, but instead it went there. But the other one's gone now, right? So we need a variable also here, right? So this needs to also be some sort of variable that we've created. So we need to do, like, let maybe VP for vertical position and let HP maybe for horizontal position, right? Something like that, right? So that way this can change as it's drawing more of them, so that way we'll hopefully cover the screen. Now the next thing that I want to do is trying to figure out how to change the position of the rectangle and the circle when they're drawn differently, because the rectangle is drawn here and the circle is drawn there. That means I have to figure out 2 different things, and I could, but I'm going to decide not to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do rect mode center, and now what this will do is I'm changing how rectangles are drawn to be drawn the same way that circles are drawn. So right now it's going to look like it's wrong, right? But that means that I need to change it because this 0, 0 point is now defining the center. So now I can make this 50 by 50 as well. Now they're using the same reference points, and that makes it easier because now I just need to figure out how to change the position of one point, just this 50 by 50, and use it for both instead of 0 by 0 and 50 by 50. What I'm thinking is, because I have this VP and HP, my thought is, what if I change this by 1 for each new spot, and then I multiply this by that value? That's my thought. So let's give it a try and see if it works. Why are you writing down there? Go here. Okay. So let's just start with HP. Let's start with just the horizontal position. I don't want to mess with both at the same time, because we saw that already makes them go diagonal, right? So we need to change one at a time. So if I do this, right now nothing will happen because the horizontal point is staying the same. So that means I also need to tell the horizontal point to change, to add by 1, right? Each time this draw loop is run, right? So now if we look, okay, closer. I forgot to move the background. So keep in mind that 3 times per second, everything in here is being drawn, right? So that includes the background. So I need to move the background into my setup. There we go. And I think I see another problem, but I'm just going to play it now that I've changed this so you can see it as well, or visualize it very easily. All right. So that's interesting, but not exactly what I wanted, right? So it's not jumping the full unit, it's jumping half of the unit. So +1 isn't enough, but if it's half the unit, if I add 2 to this, right, that would be twice as much, right? So that sounds logical, so let's give it a try. There we go. Perfect. So now I've got this on the horizontal repeating, right? Now my issue is I need to repeat on the vertical. Now I can't, well, I mean I can. Okay, so if I change the vertical position the same way, we're going to get the diagonal issue, right? So now if I do this times VP and this times VP, cool, but we're not getting the whole area covered, right? So that means that I need to add to the vertical position only after the whole horizontal row has been filled, right? So what I need to do is I need to have a condition, right? So we know that this is HP1, right? We know that this is HP3, right? Because we're adding 2. So HP1 is the start, right? To draw that next one, we add 2, so that's HP3. To draw the next one, we add 2, so that's HP5. To draw the next one, that's HP7. So once HP is greater than 7, then we need to move down to that next row, right? So getting a little programmy here, that might be a little hard to wrap your mind around depending on your experience with code, but just follow with me. So we can say if HP is greater than 7, then we're going to have this happen, right? We're running a new block of code, right? And then what we want to do is, well, we'll start with that, and now we'll see what happens. Oh, nothing. Oh, I know why. So it is likely drawing them down now, but the problem is they're off the page now, right? Because it is putting more of them, but they're over that way. So for example, if I say if HP is greater than 3, now they start to go down, right? Because it's drawing off the page. So we need to reset HP to go back to the starting point, right? Which was HP1. So here we're going to say HP is equal to 1. And now it should start back here, right? So now we have a piece of generative art, right? And every time that we run this, it's going to produce a different piece. Now, in my example, I did play with a few more things, right, after getting to this point. So let's talk about some things that I changed. So I decreased the size, right, so that way more would fit in there because I think that looks closer to the original. And I also decided that I didn't want complete random colors. I wanted mine to be more in like this red and bluish range, red for the background and blue for the circles. So we can play with that as well. So instead of saying that I want the full value for all of these, I could say that I want red to start at 150 and go to 255. So it's going to be higher in the red ranges. And maybe I don't want green to go all the way up. Maybe I want green to only go up to 100. Maybe I want blue to only go up to 100. So now all of these are going to be more reddish on the background, right? There we go. Maybe I want the same thing with the circles, except instead of maybe red, maybe I want closer to blue, right? So I could say that this only goes up to 100, and maybe this only goes up to 100. And then I could say that this starts at 150, right? So now all of my circles are going to be always a shade of blue. And they might sometimes be a little bit more purplish, or they sometimes might be a little bit more greenish or grayish, right? But that's sort of some of that randomization. Now if I want to fit more of these in there, like I don't want them to be so big, I can just cut down all of my values in half, right? And that will make each of these smaller. Like 42 or something. All right, now they're all smaller. Now they don't go all the way across, right? Because keep in mind my count, right? So this is only going that far across. So if I want to go all the way, then I need to actually double this number, right? When does the horizontal position stop and it starts moving vertically? Is at 7, right? We need to go twice as far, at least twice as far. So maybe this becomes 14. Almost. So 16. The other thing that I did, there we go, nice. The other thing that I did was I made mine longer, right? So to make it longer, that means that we need to actually modify the canvas, right? Because this canvas is a square, and a lot of his work is, well, some of it's square, but a lot of his work is a little bit more portrait style, right? It's a little bit taller than wide. Not all of it. Some of these aren't, but some of them are. So then we can just go up here and say that we want this to be, no, this one. I think it's this one. There we go. Right? So now we have a piece of generative art, right? And so we can also do this faster if we want, right? So right now this is going kind of slow. Like maybe I want it to just be like almost instant, right? And so this is an aspect of generative art, right? Do I like this one? Maybe. Do I want to screenshot this one and say that this is my piece of art? Maybe. Maybe not. I can run it again, right? Maybe I like this one better, right? Maybe I like this one better, right? So this is one of the things about generative art is instead of me having to go in there and like hand modify or like recreate the whole thing, I can just press play again and again and again until I find the one or the couple ones that I like, right? So that's one of the cool aspects about generative art is it is generating a new work for you every time that you run it based on the instructions that you have given it.